These cancer cells are very smart cells. It's difficult to tame them. It is difficult to control them, and that's where there are different modalities of treatment. So we say surgery, we say medical oncology related therapies, radiation oncology. So when all these experts together brainstorm and then decide that which therapies are required for this particular patient and in which sequence, what dosages, etc., then we plan a best plan for that unique patient. So it is very relevant that we should target the potential toxicities. We should provide them care wherein the side effects can be minimized.
We are delighted to be joined by Dr. Jyoti Bajpai, lead consultant in medical and precision oncology at Apollo Cancer Center, Navi Mumbai, Maharashtra.
There are 80% or even more cancers are almost sporadic, and there are 10 to 20% cancer which are hereditary, which runs in family, and wherein this genetic analysis, knowing the genetic level abnormality, makes a role. So in less than 50 years of age, if we are finding any breast cancer, then we do the genetic analysis of, or if there are some other family history, or if there are male breast cancer, or if there are bilateral breast cancer, and there are certain more criteria. So in all those patients, we need to do genetic testing. More than 50% of our patients present in locally advanced stage. And when we ask them, many of them belong to remote interior places, and then when we ask that, this is such a visible lump becoming fungating, and then they're coming 1 year, you're sitting on this lump, and then they mention that what kind of logistic challenges they are facing, the psychological burden, the burden of, that they will be abandoned. That is such a fear which is so rampant, and that is not only in only poor, that is even in well-to-do families. Be very assertive, be bold, come in front, discuss about your disease, don't hide your symptoms. As early as possible you get detected, we are having a better chance to offer you better kind of treatments and cure. Also, do not afraid that these kind of treatments always have bad quality of life. It is no longer true. The medicine is advanced, and there are wings. Not only we can give you quantity of life, we can give you quality of life also, and very dignified. You need to speak, you need to be loud and clear, because silence doesn't help you, it helps cancer.
Hello and welcome to The Pink Beyond the Lines, a special podcast series organized by Voice of Healthcare and supported by Gennova Pharmaceuticals. This podcast series aims to raise awareness about breast cancer, breaking myths, sharing experts' insights, and empowering our listeners to take proactive steps towards early detection, better treatment, and comprehensive care. As part of our Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we bring you conversation with leading oncologists, healthcare professionals to understand breast cancer for prevention and early diagnosis to treatment, survivorship, and holistic care. In today's episode, we are going to focus on empowering care, the complete spectrum of breast cancer management, where we'll explore supportive care, multidisciplinary decision making, modern therapies like precision medicine, immunotherapy, and how patients and families can feel empowered throughout their journey. And today, for this episode, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Jyoti Bajpai, lead consultant in medical and precision oncology at Apollo Cancer Center, Navi Mumbai, Maharashtra. She is also visiting consultant at Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital, former professor and convener of Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai. She is founder general secretary Immuno-Oncology Society of India. She has also been a Global Access and Impact Committee core member of SIDSI USA and also a core member of Immunotherapy and Women for Oncology in ISMO. Dr. Bajpai has vast experience in supportive care, women's cancer, quality of life, immuno-oncology, and has contributed to national and international guidelines while leading several clinical trials. Welcome to our show, ma'am. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much, Simran. Indeed a pleasure to join you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, we just, our audience just heard the kind of great and, impactful experience you have in the field of oncology and precision medicine treating breast cancer. Ma'am, to begin with, as our title also says, empowering care, and it is a very strong phrase which we often heard. So, if you could just explain it, what does it truly mean in context of breast cancer management?
I think great question, I would say, to begin with. And empowering essentially means that, it is essentially to personalize. It essentially that, the treatment is no longer one way, journey wherein the, patient sits on a passenger seat and the doctor or paramedical staff is on the driver's seat. Rather, it is making sit the patient herself on the driving seat, and wherein we can provide them options that you have artificial intelligence, you have x y and z test available, you have genomic analysis, you have genetic testing, you have imaging, everything, and these are the x y and z options for you. And then taking a well informed personalized decision, integrating every aspect of care. It is not only you know uh, curing a patient or controlling a patient, but treating them holistically, because we are not only treating tumor, but we are treating the patient.
Very rightly said, ma'am. We are not just treating the tumor, it's about the patient. Ma'am, we have often also heard a term supportive care, which I mean is a basically holistic care for a breast cancer patient. And it I believe it definitely helps them throughout the journey. So could you explain us in the simple terms what enhanced supportive care means and how it improves the quality of life of patient during and after treatment?
So I think again, this is extremely relevant because again, when for a patient, I would say, in these 2 to 3 decades of active oncology experience, what I see that it is very important for a patient to increase quantity of life, but also the quality of life. So they want to enhance or increase quantity as well as quality. So it is not just adding years, but it is adding quality years. So supportive care is to the center stage, I would say, because with the years of lot of trials, lot of work, we are achieving a lot of benefit in survival statistics. So when we are improving survival, we definitely want that our patients should be as normal as possible, and they should enjoy the remaining life years. So it is very relevant that we should target the potential toxicities, we should provide them care wherein the side effects can be minimized.
Hmm.
So I am a proponent for enhanced supportive care, and wherein I really look very personally that which patient require what kind of enhanced supportive care, what kind of any additional therapies can make a difference. For example, in my last affiliation in Tata Memorial Center for almost 2 plus decades, wherein I did a lot of trials, concentrating on supportive care, like scalp cooling for alopecia prevention. So many patients, they used to come to me and they were telling that I don't want to take chemo because I don't want to lose on hairs.
Hmm.
So we did this randomized trial and shown that by using scalp cooling device, we can prevent significantly this hair loss, which give them dignified years. Similarly, I did a randomized trial which is later published in Lancet Oncology, and kind of changing towards the guidelines and the standard of care, that a small dose of olanzapine, which is a essentially antipsychotic drug, when we adding to our anti-vomiting regimen, we can substantially control vomiting, which is induced by chemotherapy, and also minimize the side effect of daytime sleepiness if we give higher dose of olanzapine. So small intervention can leads to drastic change.
Yeah.
So I really very carefully choose that which patient, depending upon their age, comorbid conditions, their wishes, their professional challenges, what kind of supportive care they need, and we provide them that.
I think that's great. And we always acknowledge and appreciate the kind of efforts our healthcare professionals are putting, the entire team behind it. When we see a patient's journey towards the recovery, towards the cure, I think that is a testament of all the research advancements and the care is, going behind this. So, salute to all our healthcare professionals for this. Ma'am, with this, I had just one question in my mind that we often talk about this multidisciplinary experts meeting, and it is a teamwork, a combined work efforts for a patient's recovery. So, how they ensure that patients receive the best and possible treatment plan?
So again, this is a very very important question, and we know that cancer is dangerous. Cancer, getting a diagnosis of cancer is a bad news to a patient. Why? Because these cancer cells are very smart cells. They it's difficult to tame them. It is difficult to control them, and that's where there are different modalities of treatment. So we say surgery, we say medical oncology related therapies, radiation oncology. So when all these experts together brainstorm and then decide that which therapies are required for this particular patient and in which sequence, what dosages, etc., then we plan a best plan for that unique patient. And that's where the role of tumor boards or multidisciplinary care comes. So the hospitals or infrastructures wherein this expert team is available and under one roof they decide and then execute, we have the best chance for cure or control. So I again, I'm a deep proponent for this MDT based therapy because that is really changing lives. That is, remember, the first chance is the first treatment is the best chance for cure or control for a patient.
Yeah.
It's not cough and cold, unfortunately, that we can do trial and errors.
Yes.
So you really need to devise a proper plan and then execute. So that's where, if too many, if two, three experts and their brains storm together, we can come to a better conclusions.
Definitely, ma'am. Very rightly said. Ma'am, since 2 to 3 decades in healthcare, we have seen a tremendous, advancements, research, trials, which has helped us to find new pathways, new technologies out there. And the biggest, the stride has been seen in especially oncology. Here I'm talking about the immunotherapy, which is another, a term which is gaining attention out there and definitely helping a lot of patients out there to recover. So how does exactly immunotherapy work, and what should patient know about this, from the benefits, from the limitations, and especially in context of the breast cancer treatment?
So I think this is extremely important question, and I would say immunotherapy is kind of a revolution in the field, and it is not only the revolution of last decade or so, but in my opinion, it's the revolution of last century, because it is really having a potential to change the fate of the cancer. In my limited lifespan, I've seen many deadly cancers, and their the treatment and their outcomes are drastically changed, like metastatic melanoma, metastatic lung, which used to be a very deadly diseases before, but with the advent of immuno and other targeted therapies, we are really seeing a change. So immunotherapy works by a very different mechanism. We call it fifth modality of care, and then it kind of augment host immune system in a way that it finds cancer cells as foreign and try to empower them, try to empower body's immune system to eradicate them.
Mhm.
So something of that sort, maybe you can say that it provides a lens to the body's immune system so that it can identify cancer cells better and try to fight them better. So that's where the beauty is, and I really believe that we are learning to tame the beast, and practically this therapy really is having a potential to control almost every cancer, but again, it is not a panacea. We need to very judiciously and precisely choose in the clinics based on couple of markers, couple of other things, and where it works, there are generally durable remissions, but not all patients who benefit. So we have to be extremely careful and cognizant and vigilant to see the side effects, because at times these immunotherapy, they understand body's own cells also as foreign,
Hmm.
and there is an autoimmune phenomena which happens, which can affect any organ system. So there can be skin reaction, there can be liver problems, there can be hormonal profile will get deranged. So we have to be very very carefully monitoring these things. It must be executed under expert hands. And I'm kind of founder general secretary, which you very alluded in your introductions. So basically I actually formed this society with the aim that we can bring more and more immunotherapy trials, we can increase access towards our patients, because these therapies are you know uh, in a couple of years back, Dr. Jim Allison and Professor Honzo, they kind of discovered the pathway wherein this revolution has come and immunotherapy has become a real possibility in cancer care. And since then, this revolution is in practice. They got even 2018 Nobel Prize, and you must have heard recently also there is a
Yeah.
Nobel Prize for
Immune.
other scientists for immunotherapy. But the thing is that it is not panacea, and we have to be very very cognizant about how we are dealing with it.
Very rightly mentioned, ma'am. And thank you so much for explaining about immunotherapy. It is very beneficial for us and for all our audience to understand its benefits and how it is affecting and helping patients, breast cancer patients.
Yeah, so about the breast cancer, I just want to mention one more point that especially the triple negative subsets, which are a very dreaded variety of breast cancer, it works the best. So, we have to again, biomarker driven diagnosis, then choosing what sequence we generally give in neoadjuvant fashion when it is early disease, and when it is advanced disease, again, there is a role of this kind of immunotherapy in breast cancer.
And since we're talking about the treatment now, precision medicine is another hype word, which means one size does not fit for all, which is a personalized medical treatment out there and reshaping the breast cancer treatment out there. Could you explain us about it and how it has, given us a new perspective, a new vision to treat our patients out there?
Right. So I think it is also one of the revolution which has come in oncology, and there is so much advancement which is happening in cancer care. And we way back started with one size fit all model, wherein we are kind of histology driven care. So one breast cancer is all breast cancers same. From there we started, and kind of similar kind of therapies are being given to all patients. And with that kind of blanket treatment, what is the drawback is that some patient may benefit, some will be having some neutral kind of a response, while some in some patient there is only harm,
Hmm.
because there is so much difference at genomic levels in these patients, and many other factors also very very important. So personalized precision care essentially see that what how they are different, how in spite of having a similar diagnosis, they are different than genomic levels, biomarker levels.
Hmm.
And then when we see we do next generation sequencing, we do molecular profiling for our tumor tissues, we also do liquid biopsies, which is again by blood based tests, and then we try to see markers for potential benefit and potential resistance to therapies, and also of potential toxicities. Similar time we do study genetic makeup, and we see that if there are a couple of genetic mutations which may run in families, and there are now therapeutic relevance, so we have some targeted therapies also available for those abnormalities. And also then if we find such mutations, then we can screen the other family members, and for the same patient we can screen her or him for other cancers.
Hmm.
So it is a lot of work, and this bench to bedside conversion is happening, which is very very heartening, and it is really changing the fate of the cancers, very very important and relevant. And no one size fits all model is really working in breast cancer. There are, at a biomarker level also, there are hormone receptor positive tumors, there are HER2 positive tumors, and there are triple negatives. And then further down the line, when we do genomic analysis among the hormone receptor positives also, there can be different resistant mechanism based on which different therapies can be devised. And similarly, even in triple negative, there can be several subsets.
Hmm.
So it is very, very important. We are refining our diagnosis, we are refining our care for the betterment of our patients.
Ma'am, this makes us realize that how far we have come in terms of the treatment and diagnosis of breast cancer. Just to understand more, if we need to go more deeper into this, since you have many decades of experience and one of the core members of the founding organizations, what is the current status or the landscape of precision medicine in India, and what exactly is the roadmap for us to go forward into this?
So again, I would say, we have to. Precision medicine also needs to be precisely practiced, I would say,
Mm.
and under expert hands, because lot of time, unfortunately, I'm seeing that there are mushrooming of labs.
Mm.
There is not authentic reports which are coming, and patients are doing it as a fancy thing, and they're walking in the clinics with having some reports in hand, be it a fancy imaging or be it a fancy these molecular profiling tests, and it's very difficult for us to how to act on those,
Mm.
because we don't know the authenticity and many other things. Essentially it is a learning curve as far as possible, because these are very precise things. So it has to be done with accredited labs, and the scientists involved are extremely extremely important. Also there is a extremely relevant role of molecular tumor boards, wherein the lab people, the bioinformatic people, and the clinicians, they put it together, discuss and dissect out those reports and see what is most relevant for this patient,
Mm.
because not always bench to bedside conversion is true. So we have to see several other factors. And when we say precision medicine, it is not only genomic. I say there are several clinical factors also which are also involved in precision medicine. For example, my similar breast cancer patient, if it is a geriatric age group which is more than 60 or 65 based on different definitions, and with multiple comorbid conditions like diabetes, blood pressure, cardiac issues, then I deal very differently, because we have to do then geriatric assessment, find that what could be potential tolerance,
Mm.
and then we can augment our protocols accordingly so that we can minimize their side effects. Similar time, my adolescent and young adult patient, that is less than 40 years. So the age is defined as 15 to 40,
Yeah.
15 to 39 precisely. And then these patients have issues of body image, cosmesis, quality of life, sexual quality of life, and pregnancy and fertility. So I have kind of established the pregnancy with breast cancer registry, which is one of the handful in world over. And we tried to do this first time in country and this part of the world. And we very successfully made these patients delivered normal babies, and followed them up with their normal milestones. So not only these mothers oncologic outcomes could be safeguarded, simultaneously we safeguarded the fetuses. So we can do that, but it again require multidisciplinary tumor board and
Yeah.
very precise planning. So these all it's possible, but we have to do it together in a teamwork and with adequate infrastructure.
You just mentioned about a successful pregnancy and delivery of a child when a mother also have that breast cancer. So, what is the possibility of that particular baby, or especially a baby girl, when the mother have this breast cancer, of having breast cancer uh, at what stage of life?
Right. So very, very important. And a lot of time people are afraid because of this. So, again, I'll tell you that, there are 80% or even more cancers are almost sporadic. And there are 10 to 20% cancer which are hereditary, which
Mm.
runs in family. And wherein this genetic analysis, knowing the genetic level abnormality makes a role. So in less than 50 years of age, if we are finding any breast cancer, then we do the genetic analysis of, or if there are some other family history, or if there are male breast cancer, or if there are bilateral breast cancer, and there are certain more criterias. So in all those patients, we need to do genetic testing. And if we find there is somebody is carrier, then there are increased chances. For example, I'll give you an example of BRCA mutation,
Mm.
which is most commonly associated with breast cancer hereditary variety. And in these patients there are very high chances. In a ballpark figure, we say 70% chances till 70 years of age to develop cancer. And in BRCA2 slightly lower than that, so are almost 50% kind. So these are very high risk abnormalities, and we screen these patients. We do a surveillance, very regular mammogram, MRI based screening. And at times, in discussion with those carrier, without even getting into cancer, we can do some prophylactic surgeries.
Mm.
We can give them chemo prevention, some tablets like tamoxifen to prevent cancers, and certain other measures. You must have heard about Angelina Jolie, which is a
Yes.
big celebrity, and actually she has increased the breast cancer awareness, the heredity variety substantially, because she in her family had this kind of BRCA mutation, and her mother and grandmother, they both had cancers. So when she got a carrier status by diagnosing this, she underwent prophylactic surgery.
I think, ma'am, you just explained us in a very simple language, and it is very important, essential for us to understand that, how a hereditary thing can also affect the coming generations and everything. And we are coming up with the best and the best of treatments, the diagnosis available right now for our country. And like ma'am said, that we are coming up with more and more accurate precision labs, and this will definitely increase the chance of early detection. Since we just spoke about the treatment, now focusing more on early detection, how much we speak about it, how much awareness we create about it is less, because it starts from the timely detection. So, early detection remains a cornerstone in our country still. So, what are some practical screening tips, strategies that women should adapt, and at what stage they should, start their screening method, the screening of breast cancer?
So I think very, very important, and I believe that this should be kind of a regular routine. It should come into regular habits. So people should be breast aware. People should talk about breast health. It should not be a stigma.
Yeah.
So I would say that, women, the girls in their 20s, they should be aware about their breast. They should be aware about their breast health, and they should do self breast examination. So as early as possible, they should start doing breast self examination. Every month they should do it. And clinical breast examination, which national guidelines like ICMR suggest that after 30 years, once in a year, if you do a clinical breast examination, it is good. So this is then garden variety of risk. If the risk is more, for example, these inherited cancers,
Mm.
wherein there's somebody already having a familial cancers, if some more people are in family affected already, then we start screening even early. And screening can be mammographic or sonographic based. So again, in normal risk individual, it is recommended that after 40 years, it might be once in a year or once in 2 years at least, depending upon different guidelines and logistics. So that kind of a screening can be done. But again, as I said, the people who carry higher risk,
Mm.
it should be started much early. And especially if there's a trend in the family, then before the earlier stage of diagnosis, it should be started. There is no age which is exempt. I want to underscore, my youngest patient was 23 years of age, and she was again this pregnancy
Mm.
associated cancer. And these cancers at times become quite aggressive. So that was one, the what I recalled, the world over literature, 13 years was the earliest stage. So we have to be very very careful. Any abnormality, any lump should not be ignored, and it should come into an expert notice, and then we can do the needful.
Ma'am, you just mentioned about the detection and how it is important. But just to understand more, what could be the barriers which commonly you see, especially the patients they come, and most if they're coming at later stage, how do you counsel them? How do you get to know that what were the hesitancies? What could be the barriers they were not coming for the screening?
So I think very 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 important. And they can be so much learning from different patients. And especially when you work in different situations, different surroundings. Right now I'm in Apollo and HN Reliance, so a different class of patients. While I was in Tata Memorial for more than 2 decades, I was before that in All India Institute. And part of my training involved Memorial Sloan Kettering and Hopkins for immuno-oncology and other cancers. So I have seen the world from different lenses, and even I'm an ESMO leadership generation graduate. So different part, different patients, different challenges. In Tata Memorial, a lot of time we see patients. And rather in my own studies, in thousands of patients, rather largest series for young breast cancer, largest series from single center for triple negative breast cancer, we saw that more than 50% of our patient present in locally advanced stage.
Mm.
And when we ask them, many of them belong to remote interior places like Bihar, UP, etc. And then when we ask that, this is a such a visible
Mm.
lump becoming fungating, and then they're coming 1 year, you're sitting on this lump. And then they mention that what kind of logistic challenges they are facing. And also many times the psychological burden,
Yeah.
the burden of that they will be abandoned. That is such a fear which is so rampant, and that is not only in only poor, that is even in well-to-do families. So they feel that because they were so scared that if something of that sort will come, then they will be abandoned. And that's where I really feel that these women needs to be empowered. And at times, even I come across somebody who told me that she when she even reached out to the husband or other family members, they ignored. And somebody said in the family that first go to quack, then they go to quack, and then they go to community practitioner,
Mm.
etc., treated differently, didn't get control. And then at very late stage, when it is already upstaged, then they took expert opinion. So that all needs to be kind of discouraged. And this kind of awareness really needs to happen.
Yeah.
And again, when the woman herself, she was wanting to get a proper diagnosis and treatment, but some other people's heavy voices suppressed her. So I think this trends needs to be changed. And even in the treatment part, I have faced one patient, I'm just recalling while you were asking that she wanted to conserve her breast, and there was a absolutely breast conservation is possible with especially this kind of therapies
Yeah.
which we are having. But the father-in-law, which I myself counseled significantly, he was of those opinion. No, he felt that breast removal is the only treatment. and he has no knowledge, no base for that, but he was adamant. And the decision maker is father-in-law. So I think those kind of things really needs to be handled very carefully and sensitively.
I think in these kind of cases, the entire say should be of that particular woman who's
Yes,
dealing with it, and it
right.
should be her choice.
Absolutely. So that's where the empowerment comes, at a central stage. It is not, I would say that, women, every woman should be able to make choices. The disease doesn't whisper. The disease comes loud and clear, and so that you should also be prepared in that manner. And there has to be a lot of support which needs to be there in some or the other form, and that's what is a true empowerment.
Very rightly said, ma'am. Ma'am, we talked about breast cancer, the treatment, early detection, and the barriers as well. And we, since October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which affects a larger amount of females out there, but we can also not ignore the other gynecological, ovarian, and cervical cancers out there. So, how important is for women to also consider screening for gynecological cancers like cervical or ovarian cancers?
So again, it's very very important because breast cancer is one disease. There can be several other cancers, and this cervical cancer is the second predominant cause. Previously, it used to be the first in India and other places. Even in India today, in rural areas, still cervical cancer is one of the dominant cause, and the incidence is decreased because of very good screening practices. So I encourage, it is a very easily screenable disease, the cervical cancer. And also it's a preventable disease, it's a vaccine preventable disease.
Yes.
So which is extremely important that the young girls, they should be they should be exposed to such vaccination. And it is very easily available. And so screening and vaccination can drastically decrease the cervical cancer incidence, and some hygienic practices, the behavior. And similarly for ovarian cancers, the thing is, although it is tricky, it generally get diagnosed at a later stage. So generally we see ovarian cancer at stage 3. Stage 3, because the symptoms are very vague: abdominal distensions,
Mm,
bloating, which can be due to multiple other factors.
yeah.
So I would like to say that if any such symptom is there, especially in middle-aged women, then don't ignore it. And come into health personnel's notice, so that we can decide whether it is significant or not.
I think those are the experts you need to consult.
Absolutely. Don't ignore. I would say that, getting regular health checks is kind of it should be so much into your routine, like we are taking coffee without a guilt.
Yeah.
So you should, self check is not fancy. Self check is toward respecting your body.
Very rightly mentioned, ma'am. Ma'am, now shifting our gears to another segment of this podcast, which is a rapid fire round. And I would request some rapid fiery answers from you. So, starting with one word that defines empowered care for you,
I would say personalized care.
rightly said. One common myth about breast cancer you wish more women would unlearn.
Um, it would be, I would say that breast cancer is only hereditary. Majority of them are sporadic. So without having any familial tendency, you can get the cancer.
Yeah. One breakthrough in precision oncology that excites you the most.
So I would say liquid biopsies, diagnosing better, and targeted therapy and immunotherapy. That's what we.
One simple habit every woman should adopt for early detection.
Regular screening.
Yes. One message you would like to give to women battling advanced breast cancer.
So I would like to say that we may not always be able to cure, but we can majority of time give you comfort, and we can always give you some dignified years, months, moments. So you should come forward. Majority of the time they are afraid of the pain
Hmm.
and some discomfort, so that can be largely taken care. Medicine is really advanced, so please come forward.
If empowerment had a voice, what would it tell to women of today?
I would say that be be very assertive, be bold, come in front, discuss about your disease. Don't hide your symptoms. As early as possible, you get detected. We are having a better chance to offer you better kind of treatments and cure. Also, do not afraid that these kind of treatments always have bad quality of life. It is no longer true. The medicine is advanced, and there are wings. Not only we can give you quantity of life, we can give you quality of life also in very dignified manner.
I completely agree, ma'am. And like you mentioned in a previous question, that we need to talk about it. We need to speak about breast. We need to speak about our health issues out there, so that it is not just another taboo topic. It is about a general topic of discussion, so that the barrier and hesitancy is no more there.
Absolutely, I would say that you need to speak. You need to be loud and clear, because silence doesn't help you. It helps cancer.
Yeah, it helps cancer to grow,
Mm,
and we don't want it.
absolutely.
Ma'am, with this, we have come to end of our discussion. But lastly, we would not let you go without a closing and empowering message to our audience out there.
So I would say that uh, the very very important thing is that awareness should be increased at very early level. This breast health and breast cancer, or even normal breast health, this all should be a coffee table discussions, and there should be stigma should be completely out from these discussions. Every woman is having a responsibility towards a fellow woman. We should come together, we should spread awareness, and 1 plus 1 doesn't makes 2, it makes 11 to me. If we handhold each other together, we can certainly make a difference.
Very rightly mentioned, ma'am. With this, we have come to end of our discussion. So thank you so much for giving your and sharing your insights with us. Helping us to educate and empower our listeners out there, so that they have this, they can take this proactive step towards the early screening, detection, and treatment. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us your time and your sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you very much. And again, towards the last, I would say that better to screen yourself than less better than that is than early detection. And even if you detect at later stage, don't think there is nothing. There is a lot of things with the advancement of medicine. Please come to expert hands, and we can certainly offer what is best by means of personalized medicine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.